are Raiden Shogun's biggest pros and cons. That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. The first thing that I've absolutely got to start with is Raiden Shogun's flexibility, because she has bucket loads. I'd say that it's one of her biggest claims to fame. She will work with most characters in this game, and you can form so many different teams of her. For instance, you can play her as an energy driver, having Raiden help reduce the ER requirements of team cores that are super reliant on their bursts to function, such as double Hydro and double Pyro. I want to put a special emphasis on Farina Yalan double Hydro with Jean or Xianyan at the end, because I believe it to be one of Raiden's best use cases in the current meta. Otherwise, if you want Raiden herself to be the star of a show, then look no further, because Raiden Overload and traditional Raiden Hyper are here to save the day. Because she has a part of her kit which lends itself to on-field damage, you can choose to play her more like a DPS rather than a battery support if that's what you prefer. Chevreuse coming out in Fontaine was also a pretty neat buff to Raiden Hyper teams, since the cop takes advantage of the overload reaction that was already present in the team, turning it into something useful by providing a huge amount of buffs on top. Alright, let's say on-field Raiden isn't really your style. You want to play a completely support-based Shogun. Well, this lady of all trades can service you in that way too, because you can also use Raiden as a skill-based support to apply Electro off-field. This is especially nice for strong teams such as Alhaitham Quick Bloom, and is also nice for low investment Hyper Bloom in general, and since it's so easy to build EM Raiden, this makes her an incredible early game unit for new players. Raiden's skill has an extremely large range of Electro application, and it also helps restore energy for the team in the process. So adding Raiden to any comp is grounds for lower team-wide ER requirements. Something that I notice people sleep on quite a bit is that Raiden's skill also increases the amount of burst damage that your teammates deal, which is super nice for when you play Raiden with units such as Yolan that do a whole lot of that. I only mentioned a few teams here, but you get the gist. Raiden works nearly everywhere. She's a very easy slot in thanks to her flexible nature and ability to choose whether she wants to on or off field, and I'll definitely go more in depth on this matter in my upcoming Raiden guide. Another thing that I feel really contributes to Raiden as a character is her ease of use. Yes, characters like Lenny do far more DPS, but how many people can actually use Lenny in a way that feels comfortable? Some units are much harder to yield top performance out of than others. Raiden at a baseline, even if you just spam her normal attacks, is definitely going to clear the Abyss just fine. And if you want to upgrade said DPS, it's not too hard to learn Raiden's higher performing combos, no matter your skill level. Yes, she is not the strongest character around, but for some people it's very important that the character isn't too difficult to actually execute. You'll find yourself having a super smooth experience with the almighty Shogun herself, and I also consider her to be an extremely mobile-friendly unit, because you can easily use her by simply button mashing the NA circle on the iPad. This applies to phone users as well. Another great aspect to Raiden is her batterying. Plenty of this game's strongest characters have the main meats of their kit locked behind their elemental burst. Think Lady Farina, Yalan, Xiangling, Bennett, you get the idea. Raiden is able to drive all of the units that I just mentioned, and helps make building offense on these types of characters far easier. For example, let's take Xiangling. She is very potent damage-wise as we all know, but she also happens to be an absolute ER solar panel. By using Raiden with her, you're able to give Xiangling an EM or attack percent sans, therefore increasing her own damage, as Raiden is able to help cover for the ER you'd miss out on by not using said sans. This of course applies to many characters other than Xiangling. She's just being used as a common example here since we all have a copy. Raiden herself can also almost always have her burst up immediately after fully using it up, assuming that you've built her correctly. I think one of the favorite ways that I've heard Raiden's more on-field based teams described is like a sustainable damage per screenshot playstyle. All the buffing leading up to her initial slash, which is one big hit of DPS, feels all very quote-unquote damage per screenshot, when in reality it's incredibly sustainable because of the Shogun's batterying. Plus, on an irrelevant side note, her initial slash is only roughly 30% of her burst's damage profile. Point is, you're never going to be strapped for energy with her around. Archons tend to encapsulate what their element is at said element's deepest core, and for Electro that would be energy. They definitely captured lightning in a bottle with Raiden's kit. I'm here every day, folks. Of course, if you're a newer player, I'm begging you not to take this pro as a way to slot Raiden into any old team that wants consistent energy generation. Yes, that will generally work for a lot of characters, but there still has to be some baseline synergy. Okay, enough hinting, my point is, don't use Raiden with characters like Ayaka, for example. Some good rules of thumb, or I suppose fingers, since we're talking about multiple rules here, as to whether Raiden's batterying would actually be useful in a team would be, is it actually effective for Raiden to on-field, or is she taking field time away from another DPS? Can Electro application possibly ruin the team synergy, or does it make it better? Is Raiden better played off-field here instead of on-field? Think Hyper Bloom, for instance. If you want to dual carry, what does Raiden offer? For example, providing Eula teams with some valuable front load, while also restoring Eula's burst. Is there a better DPS or supportive driver that you could be running in place of Raiden that would offer more valuable qualities over only helping with ER? Does Raiden actually make sense in the team? For example, take Ayaka again. Raiden doesn't synergize with Freeze, so why would she work with Ayaka? Though Raiden works in 90% of archetypes, so this won't be a cause for issue most of the time. And most importantly, do the characters actually have an energy issue? Please don't sleep on the field time issue I mentioned. It's honestly more DPS to have your main DPS do all the lengthy on-field damage and use Raiden as a skill bot if Electro application is all you need. Yes, you won't get all of the ER that her burst provides by using her this way, but the extra particle gen is still valuable. Either way, if Raiden passes that checklist, then rest assured your Shogun will act as an excellent can of fuel to juice up your whole team. Oh my Archons, she said the thing! Another neat thing about Raiden is that I found her to be a very free-to-play friendly pull. This is for a few reasons. First off, if you want to play DPS Raiden, the catch is free. All older players know this. You get it from fishing in Inazuma, and the refinements are incredibly strong. The catch is simply a great polearm in general, so if you're a newer free-to-play player who hasn't already went out of your way to get one, take this as your sign to get fishing. Yes, it's a pretty monotonous process, but considering what you get left with afterwards, I'd say it's all well worth the toil. Other than that, if you're interested in Dendro Raiden, you're in for an even cheaper time. No need to frenzy over crit stats. All that Dendro Raiden wants is EM, EM, and more EM. You can easily slap her on a D-Bane or any other EM polearm and your build will be done. The coolest thing is that you don't even have to level any of your talents if you're only pulling Raiden for Hyper Bloom, because her value isn't going to be her DPS in such a case. Instead, you'll find her large range of Electro application is going to be the real golden goose. Or I suppose, purple puppet? Anyways, let's not mention Raiden with puppets. We all know how that tends to go. Though I still think it's worth leveling her skill even in this case for the extra team-wide burst damage bonus percent. In Hyper Bloom teams, the Electro character's EM matters a lot because they're the primary trigger of Hyper Bloom itself. Pair EM Raiden with that wide range we just discussed, and you got yourself quite the Dendromaniac. She's also got a ton of weapon options in general, and because she can drive such a large set of characters, many in that said set being budget-friendly options such as Xingqiu and Xiangling, you'll easily be able to form a free-to-play team with her. I occasionally show this statistic in my videos when it's relevant, and I'm gonna show it here as well. I really do think that if you're a new player that needs a super budget-friendly team, you should be playing Raiden as an off-field Hyper Bloom unit. That's clearly not the popular choice in-game, as you can see. Hyper Raiden is still decently accessible, of course, thanks to the catch and Chevreuse being a good buffer even at C0. But I do believe that Hyper Bloom Raiden is significantly cheaper to put together compared to the DPS Raiden. Do know that I'm mostly aiming this advice towards newer players that don't have many resources, that are looking for a very budget-friendly team that doesn't require a whole lot of resin investment in order to hit the ground running. In any case, naturally, play Raiden in your preferred way. She'll still generally be quite accessible on the whole. Unfortunately, this intimidating warrior doesn't come without her flaws. I'm gonna invite you to take this particular point as both a pro and a con, because I can't deny that Raiden at C2 and C3 is pretty good, but I can't lie and say that it's equally as worth it as it used to be. I will start by saying this, a C2 to 3 Raiden is still a strong option for anybody who already has those constellations unlocked on her. She can still do very high, competent damage if you have those unlocked. My point is not that C2 to 3 Raiden is weak, because no she isn't, the DPS increase is still quite hardy. The following message more so goes out to all of you who are either on the fence about pulling for C2 or 3, and are starting with either 0 copies or C0. Or for those of you who still think that C2 to 3 Raiden is a top tier DPS. For the record, if your Raiden is on C1, then you might as well just go and finish her off by getting C2 and perhaps eventually C3. I'm keeping C3 in the loop here because there's a pretty big DPS difference between a C2 and 3 Shogun. Anyways, now for my point. C2 Raiden, specifically C2, has been power crept pretty badly. Before, back when Raiden had just come out, her at C2 would have been considered as strong as a C6 DPS. That simply isn't the case anymore. A Shogun with her second constellation unlocked is equal to a C0 R1 Nervalette. Yes, you have to literally C2 Raiden in order for her DPS levels to match up to the level of a C0 Fontaine unit. And if you were to give Nervalette, Arlecchino, or Linny that same level of investment, shoot, even Mualani, dude, Raiden is going to be left looking like a joke. It also doesn't help that Raiden C4 to 6 aren't all that great. Her max power level feels pretty much capped at halfway through her constellation lineup, and there's not much further you can go from there aside from investing in her teammates, of course. There are simply far stronger C2 DPSs to invest into nowadays. C3 Raiden is definitely more competitive, but why go for her C3 when you could put that into your Arlecchino again, and then quite frankly sneeze at the abyss in order to clear? The TLDR is that Raiden with her cons doesn't even beat a C0 R1 Fontaine DPS, and note that this is before Cinder City Kachina, so the gap might be even greater now that Nervalette has a new best in slot team with Cinder City Kachina, and who knows, all Fontaine units might be getting a huge upgrade in the near future. My advice is that if you haven't already pulled for Raiden's cons, don't start now. Unless you're some huge mega simp, there are simply far better units to invest into constellations-wise, and since Raiden's main use cases nowadays revolve around utility, there's no point in hyper-focusing on her damage-based playstyles. Pour all of that into modern Fontaine or even Natlan characters instead, who are guaranteed to net you a whole lot more power. That point also ties pretty nicely into my next point. DPS Raiden is... okay, so I said a C2 Raiden keeps up with a C0 Nervy. So what does that say about a C0 Raiden versus a C0 Nervy? Listen, yes. Raiden is gonna clear the Abyss, of course she is. Every character is gonna clear the Abyss if you know what you're doing. But some characters will do it a lot faster than others with a whole lot less investment. My point isn't that Raiden can't clear, yes she obviously can. My point is that other characters can do it significantly better than her now. Just about every Fontaine DPS outclasses a C0 Raiden in terms of damage numbers. Some of the major kickers will be Nervalette, as I've already mentioned, Arlecchino, Lenny, Chloriander, Navia, especially now that we have Cinder City Kachina, you get the idea. Even older DPSs such as Xiao and Wanderer vastly outperform Raiden if you play them in their modern best installed teams, but I won't put too much emphasis on those two because they're both pretty expensive carries to gear out both weapons and teams wise. Shoot, I mentioned Chloriander there. She's literally an electro DPS as well, so what reason do you have to play Raiden as one? Plus, she can play each other's overload teams as well with much better performance, and Chlorant actually has quite a large number of teams that she can play in. This essentially makes DPS Raiden feel very redundant. She's so outclassed by everyone else that it's much better to look at C0 Raiden as more of a support character that is capable of doing pretty decent damage contributions on top. This is not me calling her bad, this is me pointing out a simple power creep that has undeniably happened. She is a driver and Hyperbloom support first and foremost, a DPS last. I think another major gripe I have with Raiden is that she's so easily replaceable as well. I like recommending Raiden to new players, especially those that plan to remain free to play, because of how many characters she can work with. It's not hard to form an Abyss-ready Raiden team, especially if you go down the Dendro route. And I'd say that most people can reach their first 36 stars with her pretty quick. Heck, my own first 36 stars was with a really random Raiden team where I paired her with good 4-star characters and it worked because it was all I had at the time. Yet the longer you play this game, the more easily replaceable she becomes. I will be 100% honest with you, outside of recording footage for videos, I basically never play Raiden anymore. There is always a better option available to me for the team that I'm trying to play. Driving for Rina Yalan Double Hydro? Then might I interest you in having Hu Tower Kokomi as the team's head? I'll hide them Quick Bloom, Kuki Shinobu's here to save the day. A strong overload Electro DPS, Chloriander cooks them all. Those are just a few examples, but you get the point. The more invested your overall account becomes and the more that you seriously flesh out your roster, the less you will need Raiden's flexibility. Also, skill progression. This doesn't apply to everyone, whether that be due to personal physical issues or because of your device. But for those of you with good coordination and devices, you will naturally get better at the game as you play it. The need for a super easy to play character isn't always going to be necessary once you become a very late game player, which is who this con is aimed towards. Obviously, you can still play her if you simply want to, even if you have set other options, yet the point still stands. You will not feel the need for her after a certain point. One thing I do want to add is that it takes quite a while to get to said point. 5-star banners roll in slowly, and not everybody is going to have access to every character at the same rate as others due to luck and whether said individual spends or not. So Raiden will have a longer shelf life for those of you who pull a lot less on new units, are free to play, and still need the ease of use for external reasons, which is completely fine and valid. You watched my video this far, so first off, thank you, and second off, I'm going to be completely honest with you because you had the courtesy to do so. Raiden is a skip. You don't need her. Modern 5-star characters from Fontaine and seemingly Natlan because Mualani was pretty good are infinitely better pulls to make in the long run. She has had her time, and that is okay. I quite like how a friend of mine describes Raiden because I 100% agree. She is the type of character where if you want to make her work, sure she can, but she is nowhere near peak meta anymore like she used to be back in the 2.x era, and even if she's pretty great for new players, I'd say just wait for Nervalette or Arlecchino to come back. They're also free to play and new player friendly while offering a whole lot more DPS. All the pros I stated were true, but so are the cons, at least in my opinion, of course. You're free to debate me and disagree with me down below in the comments or even agree. The main point that I'm trying to make here is that just because my personal opinion of Raiden is negative, doesn't suddenly negate all of her good qualities. Yeah, of course I don't play her, I have a ton of heavily invested teams that do way more damage than hers, but for a free to play with limited options, she may feel a lot better. Definitely speak to multiple people, both Raiden lovers, haters, and neutralists to better form your own take. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Raiden's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and Raiden claims that she can't cook, but if hypothetically, let's say Dendro is a vegetable and she triggers Hyperbloom, would that not count as cooking vegetables? I mean, this doesn't matter at all, but it's food for thought. I'm here all night, folks. Here all night.